The Seattle rain tapped against the windows of Damian Pierce's lakeside mansion, a rhythm that had become the soundtrack to Olivia Reed's afternoons. She sat cross-legged on the library floor with 7-year-old Jackson, helping him construct a volcano for his science project. "If we add more baking soda, the eruption will be bigger," Jackson explained, his dark curls falling across his forehead as he carefully measured ingredients. "That's right," Olivia replied, "but remember what we discussed about scientific control? We need to follow the exact measurements to get consistent results." Jackson nodded seriously. For a child who had lost his mother only 18 months ago, he possessed a remarkable focus and maturity that sometimes made Olivia's heart ache. She'd been his tutor for just over a year, hired when Damian Pierce, founder of Pierce Technologies and one of Seattle's most eligible bachelors, realized. His demanding schedule was affecting his son's academic progress. What had begun as 3 afternoons a week had gradually expanded until Olivia was at the Pierce mansion almost daily, providing stability that both father and son desperately needed. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, followed by Damian's voice calling out for Jackson. Unusual, Olivia thought. He rarely returned from the office before 8. "Dad!" Jackson abandoned the volcano and raced from the library. Olivia began cleaning up, giving father and son their privacy. She'd learned to navigate the complicated dynamics of working in a household marked by grief. Damian Pierce was brilliant, driven and utterly devoted to his son. But since losing his wife Vanessa in a plane crash, he'd retreated into his work, building walls that few could penetrate. "Ms. Reed." Damian appeared in the doorway, Jackson's hand in his. At 38, he carried his success with an unconscious grace. Tall, with sharp features, softened only by eyes the same warm brown as his son's. Today, however, those eyes looked troubled. "Could I speak with you in my office once Jackson is settled?" 15 minutes later, Olivia sat across from Damian in his home office, a space of glass and steel that overlooked Lake Washington. Outside, the rain had intensified, blurring the city lights across the water. "I apologize for the interruption," Damian began, his fingers steepled before him. "I received some concerning news today." "Is everything all right with Jackson's schoolwork?" Olivia asked. "This isn't about academics." He passed a folder across the desk. "My late wife's brother, Thomas Sullivan, has filed for custody of Jackson." Olivia opened the folder, scanning legal documents that made her stomach drop. "On what grounds?" "Emotional neglect. Inadequate parental presence." Damian's voice remained steady, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his chair. "He claims my work. Schedule makes me an unfit father." "That's ridiculous," Olivia said immediately. "You're devoted to Jackson." "Am I?" His gaze shifted to the rain-lashed windows. "I'm at the office 60 hours a week. Thomas and his wife have 3 children, a house in the suburbs, and a mother who doesn't wake up at 3 a.m. designing software instead of sleeping." Something in his defeated tone alarmed Olivia more than the legal threat. "You're not considering giving him up?" "Never." The word was ice. "But my lawyers believe Thomas has a compelling case. Jackson needs stability, a complete family unit, something I've failed to provide." Olivia waited, sensing there was more. Damian's eyes met hers directly. "I have a proposition, Ms. Reed. One that would secure Jackson's future and compensate you substantially." He slid another document across the desk. "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "A temporary arrangement," he continued. 1 year with a divorce settlement of $2 million. You already care for Jackson. This would simply formalize your role and strengthen my position in court." "You want to buy a wife?" Olivia whispered. "I want to protect my son." Damian leaned forward. "The hearing is in 3 weeks. With you, I can offer Jackson what Thomas claims I can't provide. A stable home with 2 parents who care about his well-being." Olivia thought of Jackson, of his quiet resilience and the trust he'd placed in her. She thought of her student loans, the teaching career she'd had to pause, the dreams of graduate school she'd deferred. "This isn't just about money," Damien added, his voice softening. "You're the only person Jackson has connected with since Vanessa died. The only one I would trust with this." Olivia looked down at the contract, at the figure that could change her life. But it wasn't the money that made her next words possible. "I'll need time to think about it," she said quietly. "Of course," Damien replied, relief flickering across his face. "Take tonight. But Jackson's future depends on your answer." As Olivia left the mansion, the Seattle rain mingled with tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. The ceremony at the Seattle courthouse was brief, clinical, a transaction sealed with paperwork and a perfunctory kiss that Olivia felt lingering on her lips long after it ended. The witness, Damien's executive assistant Priya, offered a tight smile as she signed the marriage certificate. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Pierce," the judge announced to the empty courtroom. Mrs. Pierce. The name felt foreign, a costume she'd slipped into without rehearsal. That evening, Damien moved her belongings into the east wing of the mansion. Close, enough to present a united front, distant enough to maintain the boundaries of their arrangement. The prenuptial agreement sat in her bedside drawer, a reminder that their marriage had an expiration date. "We should tell Jackson together," Olivia suggested as they stood awkwardly in the hallway between their rooms. Jackson's reaction was unexpected. He studied them both carefully from his perch on the living room sofa, dinosaur figurines forgotten in his lap. "Like a real family?" he asked, his voice small but hopeful. "Yes," Damien answered before Olivia could formulate a response. "Ms. Reed, Olivia, will be living with us now as my wife and your stepmother." Jackson considered this, then asked the question that pierced Olivia's heart. "Will you leave too? Like Mom did?" Olivia knelt before him, taking his small hands in hers. "I'm not going anywhere, Jackson, I promise." Later, after tucking Jackson in, she found Damien in his office, surrounded by the blue glow of multiple monitors. "We need to discuss our story," he said without looking up. "Thomas's lawyers will investigate every aspect of our relationship." "How did we fall in love?" Olivia asked, settling into a chair. Damien finally turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "The truth, with modifications. You came to tutor Jackson. We grew closer over the past year. I admired your dedication to my son, your intelligence, your patience. And I was drawn to your commitment as a father," Olivia continued, surprising herself with how easily the fabrication flowed. "Your brilliance, your determination to build something lasting." For a moment, the fiction between them felt dangerously close to truth. "Our first date?" Damien asked, a strange tension settling in the room. "The Seattle Symphony, Tchaikovsky. You mentioned once that Jackson's mother loved classical music." Damien's eyes widened slightly. "How did you know Vanessa?" "Loved Tchaikovsky?" Jackson told me. "He remembers her humming the melodies while painting." Silence stretched between them, the weight of a real woman's memory suddenly present in their manufactured love story. "The first time I knew I loved you," Damien said quietly, "was when Jackson had the flu last winter. You stayed all night reading to him when his fever made him restless. I realized then that I couldn't imagine our lives without you. The fiction was perfect, plausible, rooted in actual events, yet transformed into something neither of them had acknowledged at the time. "Tomorrow we meet with the custody lawyers," Damien said, returning to business. "Thomas and Rebecca will be there with their counsel." "I'll be ready," Olivia promised, but nothing could have prepared her for the cold fury in Thomas Sullivan's eyes when they entered the conference room the next day. Beside him sat Rebecca Sullivan, a polished blonde whose resemblance to the photos Olivia had seen of Vanessa was unsettling. "How convenient," Thomas said, his gaze flicking to Olivia's. Wedding ring. 14 months a widower, and suddenly you found love again, with the tutor no less. Thomas, Damien's voice was measured. I understand your concern for Jackson. Do you? Rebecca interrupted. My sister hasn't been gone 2 years, and you've replaced her with an employee half your age. How do you think that affects her son? Olivia felt Damien tense beside her. Before he could respond, she placed her hand over his on the table. Mrs. Sullivan, she said calmly, I would never presume to replace Vanessa. Jackson speaks of his mother every day, and we honor her memory in our home. My presence in his life is as someone who cares deeply for him, not as a replacement for the mother he lost. The sincerity in her voice wasn't feigned. Whatever arrangement had brought her into this room, her love for Jackson was real. The meeting proceeded with tense negotiations and thinly veiled accusations. When it ended, Damien guided Olivia out with a hand at the small of her back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. In the car, he finally spoke. You were remarkable in there. I meant what I said about Jackson. I know. He stared through the windshield at the rain-slicked streets. That's why I chose you. At home, they found Jackson waiting anxiously. Olivia watched as Damien knelt before his son, explaining in simple terms that Uncle Thomas and Aunt Rebecca missed him and wanted him to live with them. But I want to stay with you and Olivia, Jackson said, confusion clouding his features. And that's exactly what will happen, Damien promised, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised Olivia. We're a family now. No one is going to change that. That night, long after Jackson was asleep, Olivia stood at her bedroom window watching moonlight silver the lake. She heard Damien's quiet footsteps before he spoke. Thank you, he said from the doorway. For today, for all of this. She turned to face him, suddenly aware of her thin nightgown, of the intimate darkness surrounding them. We should practice, Damien said, moving closer. Being comfortable with each other. For appearances. His fingers brushed her cheek with unexpected tenderness. When he kissed her, it wasn't the clinical press of lips from the courthouse. It was gentle, questioning, and frighteningly real. Olivia pulled away first. For appearances, she echoed, her voice unsteady. But as she closed her door after Damien's departure, Olivia wondered which was the greater fiction, their marriage of convenience or the pretense that it hadn't already begun to change them. Both. Part 3. Hidden Motives. The annual Pierce Technologies Charity Gala arrived 3 weeks into their marriage, transforming their private arrangement into a public performance. Olivia stood before her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected back, draped in midnight blue silk, adorned with diamonds from the Pierce family vault. You look beautiful, Damien said from the doorway, his appreciation evident in the warmth of his gaze. Is it convincing? She asked, smoothing the unfamiliar fabric. It's not a costume, Olivia. It's who you are now. The ballroom of the Four Seasons glittered with Seattle's elite. Tech entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and the social figures who orbited their wealth. Olivia felt their scrutiny as Damien led her through the crowd, his hand steady at her waist. Damien Pierce, finally tamed, remarked Eleanor Whitman, a silver-haired board member. Your new bride is charming. Though I must say, the wedding announcement was quite a surprise. When you know, Damien replied smoothly, drawing Olivia closer. Throughout the evening, she played her role flawlessly, the devoted wife, the thoughtful stepmother, the perfect partner to one of Seattle's most powerful men. Yet beneath the smiles and practiced anecdotes about their whirlwind romance, Olivia's unease grew, particularly when she noticed Thomas Sullivan in deep conversation with James Harrington, Pierce Technologies' chief competitor. They've been meeting regularly, Priya confirmed when Olivia casually inquired. Ever since Vanessa's death, actually. Later, as Damien delivered his speech about the company's charitable initiatives, Olivia found herself cornered by Rebecca. "Sullivan, he's very convincing, isn't he?" Rebecca's words sliced through social niceties. "So passionate about changing the world through technology." Vanessa believed every word, too. "I'm sorry for your loss," Olivia said carefully. "Jackson misses his mother terribly." "Does he? Or has Damien already erased her from that house?" Rebecca's perfectly manicured hand closed around Olivia's wrist. "You should know what you've married into. Damien isn't the grieving widower he pretends to be. Rebecca." Thomas appeared beside his wife, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Shouldn't you be congratulating the happy couple rather than monopolizing the bride?" His gaze shifted to Olivia. "Has Damien shared the details of Pierce Technologies' new security protocol with you? The one that mysteriously appeared after Vanessa accessed certain company files?" Before Olivia could respond, Damien materialized at her side, his expression carefully neutral despite the tension radiating from him. "Thomas, always a pleasure. If you'll excuse us, I believe they're playing our song." On the dance floor, Olivia fit perfectly in Damien's arms, their bodies moving in surprising harmony. "What was Thomas implying about Vanessa?" she asked quietly. "Nothing worth discussing tonight." Damien's jaw tightened. "Thomas has never forgiven me for marrying his sister. When Pierce Technologies succeeded beyond his expectations, his resentment only grew. And now he wants custody of Jackson. Jackson is my son in every way that matters," Damien said fiercely. "But to Thomas, he's a Sullivan, and the Sullivans have always believed they were entitled to more than they earned." The following morning, Olivia woke to find Damien already gone, a note explaining he'd been called to an emergency board meeting. With Jackson at a friend's house, she found herself alone in the vast mansion. Her thoughts returned to Rebecca's cryptic warnings and Thomas's insinuations. The courthouse corridors echoed with hushed conversations and the click of expensive shoes. Olivia sat beside Damien on a polished wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. In her year of teaching and months of tutoring, nothing had prepared her for the sterile brutality of family court. "Ms. Reed, excuse me, Mrs. Pierce." Damien's lawyer, Natalie Winters, approached with a stack of documents. "The judge has requested a private meeting with you before the proceedings begin." Damien's expression tightened. "That's unusual." "Very," Natalie agreed. "Thomas's team submitted new evidence late yesterday. The judge wants to speak with Olivia alone." In the judge's chambers, Olivia faced the stern gaze of Judge Carolyn Mendez, a woman whose reputation for protecting children's interests was legendary in Washington state. "Mrs. Pierce," she began, "I have some concerns about the timing of your marriage." "I understand how it might appear, Your Honor." "Do you?" "Because what I see is a wealthy man who married his son's tutor 3 weeks after learning of a custody challenge." Judge Mendez slid a folder across her desk. "Are you aware of these emails?" Olivia opened the folder and felt her blood freeze. On the page were printed emails from Damien to his lawyer, dated one day before he'd proposed their arrangement. "Need a solution to the Sullivan problem. Looking into potential candidates for marriage of convenience. Background checks on household. Staff underway. Reed seems most suitable. Already close to Jackson, financially vulnerable, student loans, no family ties. Olivia began, then stopped, her practiced defenses crumbling. "Mrs. Pierce, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen every form of manipulation in custody battles. What concerns me most is not Mr. Pierce's calculated approach, but the willingness to use a child's affection for his tutor as a weapon in this fight." "Jackson isn't a weapon," Olivia said firmly, finding her voice. "He's a little boy who lost his mother and who needs stability. Which is precisely why I'm concerned about a marriage that appears designed to terminate once custody is secured." Olivia met the judge's eyes directly. "When I agreed to marry Damien, I knew it was unconventional. Yes, there were financial considerations. Yes, the timing was strategic. But my commitment to Jackson is genuine, and what has developed between Damien and me is... She faltered, struggling to define what had grown in the space between contract and reality. Is what, Mrs. Pierce? Complicated, unexpected, real. The admission surprised even Olivia. I didn't expect to care for him, but I do. Deeply. The judge studied her for a long moment. Thank you for your honesty. You may return to the courtroom. Olivia walked back on unsteady legs, avoiding Damien's questioning gaze as she took her seat. The hearing proceeded with clinical efficiency. Character witnesses for both sides, expert testimony on Jackson's emotional well-being, financial disclosures. When Thomas took the stand, his performance was masterful. The concerned uncle, the guardian of his sister's legacy, the man who wanted only what was best for his nephew. After Vanessa's death, he testified, Damien became increasingly distant from Jackson. The boy was essentially being raised by a rotating staff of nannies and tutors until this convenient marriage materialized. During a recess, Olivia found herself alone with Rebecca in the courthouse restroom. You seem troubled, Rebecca observed, applying fresh lipstick. Having second thoughts about your arrangement? What do you want from me? Olivia asked wearily. Rebecca's expression softened unexpectedly. I want you to understand what you've walked into. Vanessa was my sister, my best friend. She died heartbroken and betrayed. By Thomas, Olivia said. Not Damien. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Is that what he told you? That Thomas was the villain? Damien Pierce built his empire on stolen ideas and broken promises. He stole Vanessa from our family, isolated her, and when she finally saw through him, he... She stopped abruptly. He what? Olivia pressed. Ask him about the security system, Rebecca said quietly. Ask him why it was deactivated the night before Vanessa's flight. Ask him about the missing files from her laptop. Before Olivia could respond, Rebecca was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and devastating implications. That evening, as they waited for the judge's decision, Olivia found Damien in his office, shoulders hunched over his keyboard, the blue light of the screen emphasizing the exhaustion etched on his face. Did you have me investigated before proposing our arrangement? She asked without preamble. Damien looked up slowly. Yes. The simple admission hurt more than it should have. The judge showed me the emails. You called me financially vulnerable. A suitable candidate. I needed someone I could trust with Jackson, Damien said, his voice tired. Someone who wouldn't be easily bought or intimidated by Thomas. And my student loans made me a perfect target. Your character made you perfect, Damien corrected, rising from his chair. The loans just made it likely you'd consider my offer. Olivia felt tears threatening. Rebecca told me to ask you about the security system the night before Vanessa's flight, about missing files from her laptop. Damien went still. And you believe I had something to do with my wife's death? I don't know what to believe anymore. Olivia's voice broke. I agreed to a business arrangement, Damien. I didn't agree to be drawn into whatever happened between you and Vanessa. Nothing happened, he said tightly. Vanessa discovered financial irregularities in the company accounts. She suspected me because Thomas planted evidence implicating me. The security system was down for scheduled maintenance, something Thomas knew because he had access to our household schedules. And yes, files were missing from Vanessa's laptop after the crash. Files that would have eventually cleared my name and implicated her brother. Why should I believe you? Because despite our unconventional beginning, I have never lied to you. Damien moved closer, his eyes intent. Not about what matters. Not about Jackson. Not about how I've come to feel about you. The air between them charged with unspoken admissions. Before Olivia could respond, Damien's phone rang. Natalie Winters calling with news from the court. Olivia watched his expression shift from tension to disbelief to something close to devastation. "What is it?" she asked when he ended the call. "Judge Mendez has granted Thomas temporary custody pending a full investigation of both households." His voice was hollow. "They're coming for Jackson tomorrow morning." The reality of what this meant crashed over Olivia, losing the child she'd grown to love, watching him taken from his home, his routine, his father. "No," she whispered. "There must be something we can do." "There's one option," Damien said, his expression grim. "But it would require you to trust me completely, to commit to this marriage beyond our original agreement. Tell me." "We leave tonight. Take Jackson and go somewhere Thomas can't reach us while my legal team overturns this ruling." "You're talking about defying a court order," Olivia said, shocked. "That's kidnapping." "Yes." Damien's eyes burned with fierce determination. "I won't lose my son, not to Thomas, not to anyone." As Olivia looked at him, this man who had hired her, married her, and somehow, impossibly, begun to matter to her in ways she'd never anticipated, she faced the most difficult choice of her life. Stay and watch Jackson taken from them both. Or run, becoming complicit in a desperate father's last stand against a system he believed had failed his child. "When do we leave?" she asked quietly. In the darkness of his eyes, relief warred with something deeper, something that looked dangerously like love. Part 5. Worth Fighting. For the cabin nestled among towering pines on Vancouver Island was nothing. Like Damien's Seattle mansion. Rustic and remote, it had belonged to his grandfather, its existence unknown even to his closest associates. Here, surrounded by wilderness and the constant murmur of the nearby ocean, they became a different kind of family, one forged in crisis and unlikely connection. Jackson thrived in the freedom of their temporary exile, collecting shells along the private beach, helping Olivia bake bread in the ancient oven, falling asleep each night between her and Damien as they read stories by firelight. For a child accustomed to the structured routine of privilege, this simpler life seemed to heal something neither of them had realized was wounded. "He hasn't had a nightmare in 2 weeks, Olivia observed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching darkness settle over the water. Jackson was already asleep, exhausted from a day of exploring tide pools. "Neither have I," Damien admitted quietly. They existed in a strange limbo. Legal communication limited to encrypted messages from Natalie, days measured in small discoveries and quiet conversations, nights filled with an unspoken tension that grew more difficult to ignore with each passing week. The breakthrough came on their 23rd day at the cabin. Natalie's message was succinct. Evidence found. Emergency hearing granted. Return immediately. During the ferry crossing to Vancouver, Olivia held Jackson close, memorizing the weight of him in her arms, terrified it might be the last time. "Are we going home?" he asked, looking up at her with Damien's eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to sort everything out. Will I have to live with Uncle Thomas?" Olivia met Damien's gaze over their son's head. "We're going to do everything we can to keep our